Tonight, Educating Connecticut, a teacher roundtable, a News 8 special in partnership with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Now, here's your host, Laura Hutchinson.
Hello and welcome to our News 8 special, Educating Connecticut. I'm Laura Hutchinson. Tonight, we are digging into a statewide crisis in our state. Young people disconnected from education and what's being done to address it. The impacts are widespread. All corners of our state, students and teachers in every district have stories to be told. The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities listened to those concerns to come up with some solutions. Our Catherine Hauser has been on the front lines of this crisis, sharing those struggles.
Violence, homelessness, hunger. We have been reporting on so many issues that are keeping Connecticut's youth disconnected from education. A report finding 119,000 of them are at risk. Tonight, we're hearing from some of them what can be done to help and the organizations making a difference.
At a young age, I faced challenges most people don't experience in a lifetime. Homelessness, sexual assault, the incarceration of a parent, losing a parent, and growing up surrounded by drugs and gangs.
24-year-old Erica Soares of Waterbury shares how she overcame struggles. She and others bravely talk about their life experiences and how they were able to find a better path with the right support, including David Mazzard.
On January 3rd, 2022, I was released from incarceration. I came home and I had absolutely nothing. I was homeless. I'm not perfect, but I have come so far from where I was from January 2022.
The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities released a report that aims to re-engage youth who have become disconnected from school and the workforce. Just last year, we learned there are 119,000 disconnected or at-risk youth in Connecticut. That's 19% of young people in our state, enough to fill 2 Yankee stadiums and Fenway Park.
When young people struggle, it affects more than just their individual futures. It impacts the safety, well-being, and long-term prosperity of our community.
In response, the 119,000 Commission was formed to come up with solutions. This new comprehensive report provides a 10-year roadmap using 4 strategic pillars and coordinated supports at the state and local levels to expand youth programs. It estimates that Connecticut would need to invest $150 million up front and $410 million annually afterward.
I want to continue to make it easier and more affordable to be a teacher.
The new legislature, now underway, will decide how the state's multi-billion-dollar budget will be spent.
I want to do outreach to get more men into teaching. Statistically, it's the boys who are the most likely to be disconnected youth.
Governor Ned Lamont pitching some of his top priorities for education in his recent State of the State address.
Let's build on LEAP. You know, the LEAP program, it's outreach, knocking on doors of those kids who missed a lot of school, knocking on the door maybe with a teacher or a peer or a friend saying, we miss you. That's gone a long way. That's bringing down our absentee rate dramatically. It's making a difference.
As for the 119K Commission, their goal is to shrink the 119,000 disconnected youth in half, slashing that number to just 60,000 in 5 years. I'm Catherine Hauser, News 8.
Now, we assembled a panel of educators, teachers, counselors, and psychologists all to weigh in on all of these topics Catherine just talked about. I sat down with them at Green Acres School in North Haven to dive into it all. Hi, everyone. We are here in Mrs. Klein's 3rd grade class. It's so nice to have all of you here today. And of course, we want to thank her and her staff for so graciously hosting us here today. Let's meet our first group of teachers here. I'm so happy that you're here with us today. Joining me here today, we have a first group of teachers chosen from districts all across the state, representing students of all ages, and both the Connecticut Education Association's Teachers Union and the American Federation of Teachers Union. So let's meet our group. Erin Michaud, visual arts teacher at Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School in New Haven. So glad you're with us today. Kevin Williams, social studies teacher at New Britain High School. Julian Schaefer, social studies teacher at Danbury High School, and Gail Jordan is here, 5th and 6th grade academic interventionalist at Carmen Array School in Bloomfield. So glad you're here with us. I first want to start with reaction to that statistic that we saw, that 119,000 youth are disconnected from education. Mr. Williams, I'd like to start with you if we can, because you've talked about your experience going to Hartford Public Schools. You've even shared with us that you knew people who may have fit into that category. Can you give us a little bit of your reaction to hearing that?
So I was born and raised in Jamaica. I came to Hartford. I went to Quirk Middle School at 13 years old. One of the programs that helped me gain success was the CRT program. I was a soccer player. It was an after-school program. It was a weekend program. We also did programs with Aetna. So there's a few programs that were out there that pushed us to get beyond our community. When you look at what's going on in schools today, a lot of kids are stuck they're behind the wall of poverty. They're stuck behind these walls. When I played soccer for CRT, the Hartford Soccer Club, we were able to travel. We went to different tournaments, and it kind of opened up my eyes to what America was. Because, growing up in the north end of Hartford, you see a certain segment. I'm a child of Chef versus O'Neill. My first soccer coach, luckily, was John Britton. He was one of the lawyers for Chef versus O'Neill. And, we went to his house. We saw he was a lawyer, and he looked like Frederick Douglass, with the beard. He ran every morning. So it kind of showed us that was a different way. You didn't have to stay in the streets. You can literally be successful by being a part of the community.
These are staggering numbers that we're hearing. What do you think is behind this? I'm hearing poverty. What else are some of these contributing factors that you're seeing in your students that is keeping them from coming to class each day?
I think that we are really competing in a lot of ways with students having access to instant gratification through video games, through all sorts of social media, and that unfortunately our curriculums haven't been able to keep up with the same fast pace to keep their interest. So I think that's a struggle that we contend with, and as students get older and are in more control of whether or not they're coming to school or not, it starts impacting them in that way. And as you said, that whole experience piece and just giving them that outlook to see that there's more out there than what's just within these classroom walls. And it really and truly is a community lift. We can't just handle it on our own as teachers. We need other people volunteering to come in or volunteering to allow our students to go see what they do and have some field trip experiences into what their lives are like.
So personal background too, what's going on at home. Mm-hmm. That must be something that you're seeing. You're shaking your head.
Yeah, a lot of students that I have maybe come late to school because they've worked late at night. They have multiple jobs. They take care of younger siblings because their parents also have multiple jobs, or they miss the bus. They don't have transportation to get to school. All these little tiny factors to get them into the buildings just don't line up some days.
And from your own personal experience, do you feel like it's being handled in your classroom or in your school district? Are you given the resources to be able to address some of these challenges? It must be frustrating for you to see students not coming to class. You want them to succeed, I would imagine.
I know the teachers I know do everything they can to support the students we have, and many of our students do have what to many of them do feel like insurmountable challenges. So whether it's, I know you mentioned some students needing to take care of either siblings or siblings' children. One student I have who I think of, comes to school sleeping many days, and it's, it's a balance of, wanting to make sure she has her basic needs met, which really is like sleep, right? And also wanting to make sure the student has what it takes to thrive. So I think really when we talk about solutions for this disconnection, I'm thinking about our students who are struggling with some of these most difficult challenges, really these social services, whether it's childcare or even I think of in my high school, I teach in Danbury High School, our counselor caseloads are over 350 students per counselor. I think in our middle schools, even over 400. And so the students who do need help, processing some of the difficult things that they're going through, just don't really have the folks that they need, those extra supports that we need as teachers too, to help our students.
That's huge.
Yeah.
In this program, we are going to see what some school districts are doing to address this, and we're going to dive into some of these topics too that you've mentioned too. You mentioned social media as well. We're actually going to take a quick break and talk about cell phones and how that's impacting classroom learning. So we are going to keep it right here, take a short break, and we'll be right back with our panel of teachers after this. Welcome back. We're here with our roundtable now. I want to dive into a topic that we've heard so much about in the news and even with our panel here today already. Cell phones in classrooms. Many districts, Waterbury, New Britain, New Haven, to name a few, have already started locking them up in pouches during class. So I want to open this back up to our panel who is with us here today. Let's start by talking about how much of an issue this is in classrooms. So you're now seeing phones go into pouches. Some of you are still seeing phones in classrooms. Tell me about what that's like, teaching students with or without cell phones now.
I mean, I think for us as teachers, it's a major distraction. And, you see the kids walking in the hallways, they have their heads down, they have their music on, they're not paying attention. And when they come into the classroom, it's kind of like the same thing. They're behind their Chromebooks, and they're hiding with their phones. They put their heads down. They have to go to the bathroom to receive a text or send a text. So I think, when we think about our society and our culture, we need to get into the habit of getting our kids to be connected to conversations, to talk to each other, to learn how to work things out. I think the cell phones in the schools, they cause fights. People meet in the bathrooms to fight. They meet in the hallways to fight. And I don't know if there's a good place for cell phones unless we create a system where kids learn to interact appropriately with each other with these cell phones.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Really?
It's difficult.
Keeping the eye contact?
Eye contact,
Yep.
It's our students, many of them who want to be, engaged in the process, do hear that notification in their pocket and just, have that tick. And I really do think to some degree we are dealing with addiction to cell phones. And as classroom teachers, it's one thing to, be asking students to put their phones away, and again, and it gets to a point where it does really take away from, I think, the educational process.
Is anyone actually using phones for a useful tool? Like pull out your phone and use it as a calculator?
As a visual arts teacher, we use it all the time for research, for cropping images. They also use their phones to take their projects that they're working on and then submit them to a portfolio. So it is a valuable tool. However, at some point, there's always this piece that brings them and gets them really distracted. And I do agree that it's addictive. It's almost like that pinging noise at the casino when you walk in and it draws you in. It reminds me of that quite a bit.
Has anyone worked with the pouches yet to know how the difference may be?
So in my district, at the middle schools, we have the pouches. But at the high schools, we've talked about it. All the teachers have advocated for it. For me, when kids walk into my class, I tell them, we're in a professional environment. Put your phone on your desk. Don't touch your phone. But that's difficult because, like you said, once that ping goes off, then you're a second-hand news source because they want to know what's going on in their world.
Now, I think it really provides it makes a space for points of contention throughout your day that are unnecessary. Like, really and truly, it's an argument. They want to see the phone. It's technically their personal device. You did not purchase it, right? And I even have some parents that'll go back and forth. No, I want my child to carry their phone with them throughout the day. In my district, you're supposed to leave it in your locker, at least for 5th and 6th grade. We're not even supposed to know you have it. But that's a point of contention for a lot of parents. No, our world is crazy these days. They want to be able to be in contact with their child like right away, but they're not supposed to have them. So it's a point of contention for families and for students right within the classroom, and it has certain social emotional impacts. right? The bullying is skyrocketing, again, through the social media, which is through the cell phones. And so it just creates a lot of barriers that are unnecessary.
I understand that aspect of it. I also know that we grew up, if parents needed to contact their kid at school, they would call the secretary, and they would, call a teacher, and you would have your child on the phone in a matter of a minute. So I understand, and I think we also need to consider that there are safety risks with phones in schools. Again, with students getting bullied and their inability to focus in class when they are getting bullied online, conflict on social media, on these phones, bleeding out into hallways. There is also, I think, an other side to that.
I know we could talk about this forever, but we are going to take a short break here because I want to be able to talk about diversity in the classroom, how important it is for students to see their teachers and their coaches and have that representation. We're going to take a short break, and we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Earlier, we played you a moment from the governor's State of the State address where he was calling for more men in teaching and coaching roles. So I want to rejoin our panel here today and talk about that, talking about diversity. The numbers show there's a major lack of it. Only about 12% of administrators, teachers, counselors, social workers, and psychologists are people of color. So compare that with the nearly 54% of students statewide who identify as a race other than white. So those numbers are staggering here. So talk to me about your experience. How important is diversity to students and their success? Do you see that correlation in your day-to-day?
Yeah, I think going back to that 119,000, right? Having someone that you can truly connect with, that you really feel sees you, hears you, and understands where you're coming from matters so much in making that connection and bringing those students back into the classroom. But we're just not a competitive career anymore.
I mean, I've been teaching for 27 years, and when I first got to New Britain High School, I was one of the only black teachers in the building. Now, obviously, that number has grown. I think it's really, really important.
So let me ask you, as the only teacher who's black in that school, and say, a female teacher here on the panel as well, do you find that students of color or the girls might, or the men in the classroom might, flock to you as guidance? Are you actually seeing that, and do you have real examples of that happening?
So I am a member of the LGBTQ+ community. I run the GSA in my school. I'm very active in the city around that topic, and those students seem to flock to my room. I have students that come in who I've never taught them before in my life, and they know my name, and they come to me to talk, and that's a different sort of diversity, but that's definitely happening in my building.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, because when kids come into the school, they find out I'm Jamaican. I'm American now, but they find out I'm Jamaican. The Jamaican kids come over. The African American kids, I've had their sisters, I've had their moms. I'm old, So they come in and, they want to reach out. So I think, it's a great space because it provides me an opportunity to bring in resources maybe other teachers don't know about. And that allows the kids to be more connected to our educational institutions.
And I have to ask why, too. Why do we think men aren't teaching? Why are there not more men coaches and teachers?
That's a great question. If I knew the answer, I'd definitely love to tell you.
It just goes back to it's not a competitive field anymore.
Right. It's a difficult field. It's a competitive field. Sure, there are plenty of, and I mean, $60,000 would be great to start at. I know there are plenty of districts that aren't even starting there. So I think we need that. I think, when I think the call for more men in teaching is important. I also feel like there's maybe more there that's also important.
It's an important role that you're in here today, and you're taking it seriously. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. We have a lot more we want to get to, but Aaron, Kevin, Julian, and Gail, thank you so much for bringing your expertise and sharing your ideas with us to give us a bit more insight. We are going to take a short break, and after this, we're going to be talking with a school counselor and psychologist to talk about on-track coaches. This is a way to really dive into students who are at risk and focusing in on getting them to graduation. Stay with us for that after this short break. One of the state's highest needs school districts are targeting at-risk students and implementing a plan tailored to their needs in an effort to get them to graduation. I went to Meriden to see how it works.
Everyone ready?
Yeah. A very important meeting has just begun inside Maloney High School in Meriden, and you're invited to sit in on this one. The goal? To help a freshman student who's been absent a lot and at risk of failing.
He's good at keeping on track with assignments if they're available on Google Classroom. Even if he's not present.
These are his teachers and school leaders, 6 of them spending time in their day to compare notes and come up with a plan to help. You'll notice they're not just talking about test scores.
There's a new student that just transferred in, and they have connected. They were friends in middle school.
Putting their minds together to figure out a way to get the student reconnected in the classroom.
I'm going to try to dig deeper to see like who he has those connections with, so that potentially if it's someone in my class, I could maybe partner them up or have them work together on an assignment.
This Kids Stat meeting, as it's called, includes an on-track coach that works specifically with the students' at-risk students.
I have 67 students right now.
Simi Miranda and another coach have nearly 70 students each just in this school. Her plate is full, but she says it's working.
I had one student who was really struggling her 9th grade year. There was a lot of trauma that had happened. We had a Kids Stat like you saw, and we just tried to figure out different ways to get her involved. She's a part of the student council now. She's involved in orchestra, and she's just completely, her grades are great.
The school focuses on high school freshmen.
9th grade, as we say a lot, is just a make or break year.
Promote to 10th grade, your chances of graduating high school go up significantly, she says, which is why it's all hands on deck.
I'll reach out to Mom, too. Mom and I communicate usually weekly.
They consider the whole picture of the student and create a plan that's convenient.
A lot of students may not have transportation after school to get home if they stay after, or they may have to take care of siblings, or they may have to work and be involved in sports. So that gives me the opportunity to get the intervention and get the extra help during the school day.
So here they are, one student at a time.
They might be successful in one class and not the other, so it's great to like give ideas to each other to help get them to be successful.
Teachers and administrators at Maloney talking, comparing notes with that big goal in mind.
Everybody deserves, regardless of their background, a chance to shine and success.
And this is part of that RISE network that Catherine Hauser was talking about at the beginning of the broadcast, which supports 17 on-track coaches in 9 schools across 8 districts. Meriden, as you saw, it's also in Hartford, East Hartford, Manchester, Middletown, Naugatuck, Norwalk, and Stamford. We asked the roundtable if this would do well in other districts. Joining me now, we have Brian Greenhouse, school psychologist for New Haven Public Schools, and Maria Nutarangelo, school counselor at the Augusta Lewis Troop School in New Haven. I want to thank you both so much for being here. It's great to have you here because I know that these on-track coaches that we just saw in that piece are something that you both have participated in. This is very much in New Haven Public Schools. And, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about the ratio to student teacher, student psychologists or counselors. Help me understand how this works. How helpful are these group meetings, and how important is it to understand the ratio that we're looking at in these schools?
We have attendance meetings every other week. And same purpose that they have at Maloney, to look at the whole child. Because if they're not coming to school, then more than likely there's other things that are going on, either in the household or as far as social emotional help that they need.
A lot of the times, issues of attendance kind of go hand in hand with issues with outside influences. So for instance, one of the students we've talked about in these meetings about, they weren't coming to school. Their attendance rate was close to 50%. And we were trying to figure out, why is this student who lives right around the area not coming to school like they should be? And when we had these meetings and we kind of became more concentrated in our effort to figure out what is going on with the student, the kind of realization we had was this was not due to the student, this was due to home. He was living with his grandmother. His grandmother had just very recently injured herself and was needing care herself to get out of the home. And so she was no longer able to walk him to school. And she didn't know what resources she had available in order to get him to school otherwise. So through the use of these meetings and us being able to collaborate with the neighborhood, we were then able to get this student to come to school regularly again. And it was night and day for the student because he wanted to be there.
Are we doing enough, though? When I hear these numbers, you know, at Maloney, that person who had 67 students, and that meeting that we saw was just about one. Are we doing enough? Do we need to have more of this? Is that possible to reach all of these students who need this kind of attention?
Well, we do the best we can. Obviously, we have what we have and we work with what we have. Ideally, parent involvement would be a must. We want parents to want their kids to come to school. And kind of to speak on what you said, one of the things we always say is that all you really need for a kid who wants to come to school is one trusted adult. And as long as there's one trusted adult within the school, the kid himself will want to come. And a lot of time, that trusted adult ends up being support staff such as ourselves, also their school social workers, and sometimes it could be someone like the person who's opening the door in the morning.
And we talked earlier in the program about how important diversity is, because when they walk through that door, if they see someone they feel comfortable with, that could be the make or break for that student. How important is this to implement this in other districts, for other school districts who aren't doing this and seeing this and hearing from you? I mean, you must see real lives changed. It sounds like you've already given us some examples here.
I would say it's crucial. Even if you only get one kid through the door, that's a win. And even more so, it's better to have the eyes on the students than not. Some things I always tell parents when I talk with them is, your kid is on the radar. You don't want your kids not slipping through the cracks. Once we've looked at them or seen them, that's not going away. So even if we're having struggles now, we're here for you now, we're here for you later, we're here for you whenever you need us.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. It's such an important topic. It really is. And we were talking about the need for bringing in more teachers. And a lot of teachers may say it's a tough job because of stress, salary, burnout. So we're going to cover that topic after the break. But I want to thank you both so much for being here. We're going to have another panel of teachers joining us to talk about that, salary in particular, burnout. Stay with us. We'll have that after the break. Welcome back. Tonight, we are educating Connecticut about the biggest challenges facing teachers and counselors in our state. A recent survey of more than 5,000 Connecticut Education Association members statewide showed almost all educators are worried about frustration and burnout. The top 5 concerns: stress and burnout, low salaries, student discipline and behavioral issues, lack of respect for the profession, and lastly, politicians making decisions that impact education. Now, whatever the reason, Connecticut continues to face a shortage of teachers in districts across the state. So how can that be fixed? We brought that to our roundtable. All right, I'm joined now by a new panel of teachers here. Thank you so much for being here. We have Lisa Cordova, kindergarten teacher in Glastonbury, James Tierney, high school math teacher in Manchester, Jocelyn Delancey, 5th grade teacher in Darien, and Richard DeMay, Spanish teacher at Global Communications Academy in Hartford. We heard a lot about what may be keeping teachers from entering the profession at all, or perhaps causing some teachers to want to leave the profession and go into something else. Salary is a big one. Talk to me about this. Has the profession changed since you've been in? Who would like to start us off?
So I've been in education for 35 years. So when I started, they just passed the Education Enhancement Act, where they raised teacher salaries to get teachers to come into the profession. So I was lucky enough to be one of those teachers who started, who was able to teach and not have to have a second job. I was able to teach, and I was able to afford to buy a home. So I feel like since 35 years has happened, I don't think salaries have increased enough to keep up pace with what everything costs these days. What do we really need to attract teachers? And that would be a salary that can have them have a wonderful life. And because we work so hard, we're a hard-working group of people.
Absolutely. And let me give this to you here. According to the National Education Association, the starting salary for a teacher in Connecticut is just under $49,000. The overall average, little more than $83,000, which is lower than the minimum living wage estimate in Connecticut, which is just over $84,000. So how do you manage the job, the stress that comes with it, the high expectations, and the salary? Is it working for you?
I would argue that it isn't working, right? Because we're losing teachers on a regular basis. We have a shortage of over 1,300 educators currently across the state. So, you know, I think a lot of us went into it because we love to teach. It's what we love to do. It's probably the most fulfilling job that you could have, right? There's nothing better. But at some point, when you can't sustain the workload, the conditions. When we talk about how much has changed, I started teaching 21 years ago, and the amount of expectation of what we're required to do in a given school day, the number of hours we're working outside of our, you know, quote unquote professional responsibilities. I mean, we go above and beyond, and the salaries just don't allow for you to live comfortably and successfully in Connecticut.
What do you see happening from the teacher shortage? You must see larger classrooms. Are we losing our paras? Does this mean that when a student needs help, you might not be getting to all of the kids who are asking for help in the short time period that you have them in your class? What is the real effect of this?
You have classes from teachers leaving in the middle of the year or jobs that can't be filled at the beginning of the year, and teachers have to pick up those classes. So now you're a teacher and you're already stressed and you're already working a lot, and you have to pick up extra classes, which means that you have extra students on your caseload. It means you have extra kids coming after school for help. There's so much that goes into it, and really what happens is you get like a leak in a dam, and it just keeps going and going and going because our shortage is so much. I think the number one thing we can do to fix our shortage is to increase teacher salaries, which will hopefully attract more people and retain more people.
What happens is that when we have a shortage of teachers, we who are in the school pick up other classes by sacrificing our prep time in order to fill in for those vacancies. We fill in other parts of the school, being an interpreter for families when they come in, so we're pulled from our classes. We also are helping out with the needs, the increasing needs that we see in our schools.
How stressful is that for you? You mentioned you got into this career because you love helping kids. How stressful is that if you see that you just have too many? And do you feel like some of them are going home at the end of the day and you just didn't give them the attention you would have normally given them? How stressful is that for you mentally as a teacher?
It's not only stressful, it's painful. It's hurtful to see when you put your care into these kids and you know that there's just not enough that you could give them to help them, you know, reach a goal or strive for success. Or you know that if this one student were in a class of, you know, 18 versus a class of 30, that they would be thriving and that they would find, you know, connections and different things that they could. And now you're sitting here going, oh, if I could only just have X or Y, you know, an additional para support so that these kids could get a little bit more attention, or a smaller class size, or just extra time to prep and plan to make something creative and fun and engaging.
And it feels like you're on the path to graduation. If you can help those students more, this is all connected. It's a ripple effect. Right?
Investing in education and educators is actually going to make a global difference, right? Because everything is just going to flourish, right? So if you're able to have a classroom, like I have a kindergarten classroom of 23, so it's very difficult to be able to give everything they need. But believe me, I run around and I try the best I can. If you're able to have a classroom of 16 and you're able to pay that teacher a living wage, they flourish, and then we have a community of learners, and then we have a community of leaders moving into the high school. So the legislators this year really need to look into the education funding and be like, we need to invest in the future.
This is a great conversation, and I want to continue this. We're going to take a short break and come back here with our panel. Stay with us. And we're back with our panel. We just started with such a great conversation talking about what it's like in the classrooms when they do become so overrun. Fewer teachers, more students. How can we attract more teachers into the field?
Well, one of the ways that I try to do it, perhaps not for this immediate generation, but for the next, is that currently I teach at an elementary school and middle school, and I make it my business to tell every child who walks into my classroom that someday you're going to be a great teacher, you're going to be a better teacher than Mr. DeMay is, and I hug them. And every opportunity I get to whisper to that child that you're doing a great job, you're going to be the best math teacher, the best Spanish teacher, that puts that bug in their ear, because research does tell us that if a child doesn't hear by 3rd grade that they can be a teacher, they probably will not be a teacher.
Wow, that is so interesting. We all need to have a Mr. DeMay in our life, for sure. And also talking about behavior, coming off the pandemic, I know there was a big shift in what teachers were seeing from their students. Can you give us a little bit of insight what that looks like?
I teach the littlest learners. I'm finding a lot of students of trauma. It came off the pandemic. Technology was forefront in every home. They are spending a lot of time online. So when they come in and they see the live teacher, they're like, what? Like they can't push the button and turn me off and things like that. So what we're finding is students are learning new ways to self-soothe that we didn't need to teach them before the pandemic, because they don't have those tools that they need to calm their bodies when they have their big emotions.
I would just add to that I think as we came back from the pandemic, when we have these student behaviors in the classroom, solving that problem and solving it really comes from teacher voice. And as we empower teachers and we listen to them and we bring them to the table around any issue, that's where we seem to find our best solutions. Whether it be student behavior, or we talking about salaries, or making the job more attractive, as long as we're listening to teachers, I think we're headed in the right direction.
I would also say I think there's a contradiction between that we're asked to do and what we're told to do in certain spaces. So, take every student's social and emotional learning into consideration and meet them where they are, but then you have a pacing guide or a curricular expectation that really doesn't meet the student's needs. And so we really need to have teachers at the table when we're discussing curricular expectations, pacing of our materials, and just the problem solving. Teachers are problem solvers naturally, and it's part of our bones. And so when you have a top-down approach to taking on an issue, and you don't involve the people who are in the room, who know the students best, who see it day to day, that's where we have this disconnect. And so we need to, as we move forward, really have the teachers at the table. We have passed legislation, our play-based learning legislation that went through, looking at kindergarten start age and making sure that when we're asking kids to be doing this heavy thinking and learning, that they're really ready and age appropriate. Those things will make a difference. They just started, so they just went into effect. So we won't see that impact for a while, but I do think we really have to understand, what are we asking of our students? Is it appropriate? Are we making our teaching and learning as accessible as we can? And are we including the teachers to make sure that they know what to do? They know how to do it. Let's let our educators do that.
Yeah, are we letting the teachers be creative with the class they have? Obviously, we know that not all students are the same, come from the same mold, right? Everybody requires something different. When you have these rigid testing deadlines, or expectations, is it something that works for your classroom overall? Are you finding that it needs to be adjusted to your classrooms in particular?
I think the best thing to do is to meet the kids where they're at. So if you just go straight to a test or straight to a pacing guideline and kids aren't there, then they're not going to find success as students, and you're not going to find success as the person teaching them. So it's about meeting the kids where they're at, finding out who they are as a person, making that connection, and then you're able to teach them the material they need and the way they need it. And that's when they're successful, and that's when they're happy about school and they're happy about the relationships they're making with the teachers.
Do you feel there's a lack of respect for the profession sometimes?
Absolutely.
Oh, I just got a big reaction from the panel.
I think the biggest disrespect comes in not providing us with the space or the room or the opportunity to exercise our voices. We are the experts. And I think that this country needs a social and cultural revolution to change the culture of how we treat, how we perceive teachers. We are the ones educating and in many cases raising your children. And I think that needs to be appreciated, that needs to be understood better, and that needs to be celebrated.
And as a parent of 2 kids, I appreciate what you 4 are doing too, taking our kids, teaching them throughout the day, but giving them that confidence and just helping them thrive in the classroom. That is so important, what you're doing. So I'll speak on behalf of parents, say thank you in this moment. We are going to continue this conversation. We do want to talk about how money may impact how districts operate as well. So we're going to come back with our panel after this. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Back with our panel now. We want to talk about funding. It is so important to talk about this. Taxpayers who maybe don't even have children are making some of these choices in our communities. Here in Connecticut, 57% of K-12 revenue comes from property taxes, and that means there's a deep divide based on where you live. Take Bridgeport, for example, where just over $19,000 is spent per student. In neighboring Fairfield, that number jumps to more than $23,000. Go a few miles down the road to Westport, where nearly $27,000 is spent per student. So we want to know what impact that difference has on the students and in your classrooms. Perhaps you can give us some insight.
I mean, I'll start since I teach in a DERG A district who does spend a significant amount of money on their students, and I would say that it makes a critical difference. Our class sizes are smaller. We have more tools to provide for our students, and if you look at our rankings, right? If you look at the national rankings or the state rankings of what districts fall, you know, you'll see the top-rated districts are the ones who spend the most money per student. So I would say it's a critical difference.
So sell me on this. You say tools. What tools are we talking about? Give me an example of what one school district may have that another doesn't, and it will make a big difference.
Well, I think people is the first one.
Yeah, I was going to say that was going to be number 1.
People. Yeah, you want.
Yeah, I mean, the people tools, right? We'll have the schools with more money will have more associate instructors, so they could do more differentiation. They can hire more psychologists and social workers, so they could work with that mental health piece, and so that the teachers in the regular ed classroom are able to get more instruction done. I mean, there are so many tools that they need, even curriculums. Programs, not curriculums,
or training,
programs and training, the professional development training. I mean, everything from the beginning of the day to the end of the day takes money, and it takes people.
And what can you say about what can be done to make it more equitable? There's a huge difference here in these districts. So what can be done to help these schools that aren't getting as much funding? What can be done?
Change the ECS formula for funding. It needs to be more equitable, and it needs to change so that underfunded school districts such as Hartford get their share of what is needed in order to properly and adequately and rightfully educate the children of Hartford.
Fully funds special education excess costs would be another issue I think is critical. We have special education needs which vary year to year, district to district, and I think when we hear the budget battles of how we want to fund our schools, one of the most critical responses is, well, we don't know how much special education will cost, and we don't know how much the state is going to give us to support that cost. And the district is required to ensure that level of tools and resources for each of those students with an IEP, and that cost can vary year to year. So it is really critical that our districts know that if they have to spend the dollars, that they'll get support in those dollars.
We're asking people to spend a lot of money all the time, everywhere. Tell me, somebody who doesn't have kids, why should they want to spend more tax dollars on public education when the cost of everything is going up? What would you say to them today?
I would say that education is a right, and it's not a privilege, and that system was there for people before us, they'll be there for people after us, and if we want the public education system to thrive, we need to fund it, because those people that maybe don't want to spend the money, all those people that'll be helping them in their lives are going to have been taught by a public education teacher most likely. So we need to have those people ready and proficient in the jobs that they're going to do in the future, and that's what we do as educators to get them ready.
And property values go up when you have a strong and thriving public school system. You have community helpers that you might not have had otherwise if you have disconnected youth who aren't going into, other career paths or college. There are so many benefits and returns on investment from public education that we don't necessarily see outright. So if you're someone who doesn't have children and you live in a community, the value of where you are is raised by the quality of the school system, and just the people around you have more supports, and it strengthens the people who are working in your local grocery store or your businesses. So I think that as a community you benefit, and I don't think you can actually measure the return on investment. Right. It's too big.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You have been wonderful. Lisa, James, Jocelyn, Richard, thank you for your time today. Thank you to all of our panels for being here. Our representatives from both CEA and AFT unions want to thank for that partnership, and of course for Connecticut Conference of Municipalities for partnering with us for this discussion. This has been a wonderful program, and of course Green Acres Elementary for hosting us here today. Thank you for having us. Best of luck the rest of this school year. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
So much covered here tonight with our panel of educators, and this will certainly be something we continue to report on as the legislative session continues and district leaders push for more funding. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.